Hello, pixel pushers and payment chasers. Strap into your swivel chairs and silence those Slack notifications, because today, on the ADOTAT Show, we're diving headfirst into the murky waters of media with the undisputed heavyweight of hybrid journalism, David Kaplan. Forget what you think you know about storytelling. David's here to rewrite the rulebook. So pour yourself a stiff drink. It's 5 o'clock somewhere in the digital world, and prepare for a no-holds-barred journey through the chaos of content creation. This isn't your average news flash. It's a full-blown revelation session.
Deserve to win when it matters most. Facing multi-billion-dollar bet the company litigation? No problem. That's why we're here. Troutman Amin, LLP, is a true legal powerhouse.
Welcome to the ADOTAT Show, where the pixels meet the pavement and digital dreams turn to reality. I'm your host, and today we're diving headfirst into the mind of David Kaplan, a storytelling sage who's navigated the shifting sands of journalism and content marketing. Buckle up for a ride through the past, present, and future media with a twist of humor and heaps of wisdom. David, first of all, how are you holding up? And I'm not asking for the PR spin. Give me the director's cut.
Let's see. Well, I did sleep well last night, so that's a plus. I would say I'm doing great. It's been a little over a year, about a year and a half, since I went from journalist primetime at Adweek, and then with my wife and I started Brand Newsroom, an editorial consultancy, content studio, what have you. I'm still, wrestling with the discomfort of, I'm a journalist, right? And it's, I was talking with a friend a few months ago. He's like, "Oh, come on, you're a content marketer." And, but as we kind of noted in the notes we exchanged, I do like to think of myself as and Brand Newsroom as operating with a foot in both worlds. We advise publishers as well as brands, as well as ad tech platform companies, investors, advisors on how to tell stories and how to tell it in a journalistic way, not just sort of here's a great press release or here's how you can get out of this trouble. It's really about being informative and informing. So
tell me something that surprised you lately.
That's how I woke up.
Something that made you drop your coffee. But of course, unless you're one of those tea people now.
No, it's still coffee. Tea, I just associate it if I have a cold. So, though, shout out to my wife who makes great tea. I would say, let's see. It's hard to be surprised in this world, isn't it? And definitely happy to say I've never physically dropped my coffee, but there's certainly things that have made me want to throw it occasionally. I think, like everybody else, there is this. I'm just shocked by the obsession with all the obsessions, whether it's whatever is going on with X and Elon Musk and Don Lemon, or everyone just dissecting a fabricated photo from the royal family. I feel like these things surprise me. That and here I am talking about it. So adding to the noise. But I'm constantly surprised about how the most inconsequential things are kind of tap into these obsessions. But hey, that's news, right?
So back in the analog days, journal was about pounding pavement, not spamming the refresh button. Now in the digital dominating the scene, how do you, David, navigate the shift from print grunt work to digital slick clicks without losing your storytelling soul?
I have been really an advocate of the old ways of doing things, and I think that in this current world, that is going to come back around, especially for the way media companies do business. But for me, it's always about, especially as the last few years as I've advised younger journalists, you can only get so far, Googling your way to news. It really is. News is about getting out there and having real conversations, meeting people, building up your sources and the trust with people. You really can only do that so much online. With online, like everything else, it's like e-commerce. It's purely transactional. I'm going to click and buy something, and that's kind of it. Whereas if I'm in a physical store, I may look around, or I may hate the store and never come back. But there is a lot more that goes on in the physical world than just digital. But the idea is using digital to kind of help that. So you'll be in the physical store. The standard omni-channel idea is that, hey, people will look at something and then they'll look online to see how it is. So I feel like that's kind of a good analogy for the way I approach journalism and the way I approach, what I'm doing now, which is quasi-journalism, I like to think, at least. I have to let other people judge.
In the kingdom of content, is the pen still mightier than the push notification?
I think it is in a lot of ways, because the push notification is, we're blind to it. I'm basically probably in the corner of my eye, my phone is popping up with all kinds of things that I don't really need to look at, and so you just get lost in it. So to me, the idea of a as I said, whether it's a physical pen or just the metaphorical pen, I think the way that we communicate directly gets attention. 1,000 LinkedIn messages from people promising to, raise your revenues 10x. It's like, I'm sorry, I didn't ask you to raise it 10x, but thanks for offering. And it doesn't really,
I just
it's
want
not a genuine
another
conversation.
1,000 readers, that's all.
That's you deserve it. And I
That's
think
my goal.
Doing what you're doing is, it takes time, and especially because there's so much noise out there, it's hard to break through. But ultimately, when you're doing something genuine and you're having great conversations, as I know you've had, so I hope I'm not ruining the streak here, but I think when you do that, it resonates. And unfortunately, everything takes a lot more time because, we're so distracted.
So has the digital makeover made storytelling richer, or just slapped a filter on the truth?
I think it's slapped a filter on it, but it's also made it more immediate. It's kind of the good things, the standard idea is that it's democratized journalism. And I think, for good and bad. And I think, for a lot of ways in the last few years, it's been kind of bad. Now we're going to see with AI. 10, 12 years ago, I was writing about the rise of content farms, and I think we're going to maybe see that a little bit, or maybe we already are seeing it. I know that there's all these predictions, I think, from Gartner and others, that 90% of online content will be AI generated by 20. I mean, I don't even know what that means in terms of 90. Some of it will be useful, some of it won't. But I think that the democratization, is a good thing to a point. But then when anyone can just do it, it creates it kind of clogs the system to a certain extent, and it basically levels the playing field. That also, unfortunately, the good stuff will be mixed in, and then you have to sift through it. And that's, as I said, with what you're doing, what I think a lot of other sites are starting to discover, that if you can break through that noise, you win. But breaking through is harder than ever.
So after dancing through decades from Adweek to your own gig, what golden rule of content navigation can you share?
So,
any pearls of wisdom, or are we just winging it?
I think everybody is just winging it. I think in a larger sense, content media is it's a simple thing. Create something, find something, share something that's interesting, that informs people's lives, their work, in cases of B2B, and that's really it. But that's also really hard to do. You can't predict it, and I would say that anyone who thinks they can predict it is also, to a certain extent, if you're going to be sensationalistic, that works, but also only so far. How many times can you write about, say, the princess's photo that will get you ahead? And I think these things, as we flood, just to pick on that story this week, as these things flood our screens, you do tune it out. So I think that the idea of surprising people with stuff that you are genuinely interested in, that's going to resonate and find an audience. And I don't think that's ever going to change. Just gets harder in different ways.
Newsrooms are becoming more a ghost town than Gotham. How are we going to fight the?
I think, as I said, it's really by being original and interesting. You can't just, for the last few years, when you had, whether it was publishers relying on Facebook or Google or Twitter to a certain extent, the idea was that, it'll just, the algorithms will find the audience for us. We don't really have to do it. We just have to kind of keep churning out stuff that hits the right keywords, and we'll be rewarded for it. And I think it really is, as I said, for me, I've always kind of just, helplessly old-fashioned. And I think in a lot of ways just get stuck doing the same, taking notes by hand, for example, though I record, of course, as well for backup. But the idea is that, finding an audience the way publishers have always found audiences is what remains. And that's how the ghost towns survive. And as I said, the idea in a way was, when everything was democratized. Anyone could be a journalist, and anyone can. You don't need a license for it. But when the idea of publishers that we need more content, we need more volume, and they brought in so many people, and now they've had to pare back because the idea is that people only have so much of an appetite for volumes of content. They really just want something original. They don't need to read the same story 2, 3, 4 times. So I think that's how publishers, get past this. And I think that, we'll figure out the right size, but also at the same time, I'm really impressed that, I can still make a living and go out to dinner, and that there is this push towards the solo or small scale thing. People are, using newsletters, podcasts like this one to do the job that it used to take for 5, 6 people. And you can do a lot on your own, even though it's there's always a balance and there's always a trade-off.
So you have a lot of experience in niche publications like Conver Media and geomarketing. I mean, is this the lifeboat? Is this the lifeboat in the media storm, or is it just a fancy dinghy?
I think it depends. Depends on the logo, maybe. But picturing fancy dinghies. So let's, if this doesn't work, we'll go into business, sell fancy dinghies, and make a fortune.
Right.
I think that for B2B, niche is necessary, and I was really skeptical of it when, in terms of my trajectory, I went from Adweek, where I was focusing just on media buying and planning agencies. And I thought, wow, that was pretty niche. And then from Adweek, I went on ultimately to paid content and then Ad Exchanger. It was like, Ad Exchanger, okay, we're just focusing on, essentially, ad tech and platforms. That's even more niche than media buying. And from there, went to geomarketing to focus on the narrow world of location-based marketing and IoT. And I thought, okay, this is no way this is going to work, and it did. And then when I went from geomarketing to start this new site called Camera Media, which was in the basically just focusing on the narrowest area of digital transformation for airlines and yield management for airlines. And I thought, is there going to be enough to write about just on that? And there was more than enough to write about. And we had a newsroom at one point of 3 people plus freelancers, contributors. People, especially B2B, want to really go dive as deeply as possible. So maybe the fancy dinghies are kind of part of that.
So we're caught in the digital tsunami, and the media world's been turned inside out like a teenager's bedroom. As the captain of Brand Newsroom ship navigating these high seas, what's been your biggest oh ship moment?
I would say, for me, this is, going back to what I was saying before, how there's a lot of opportunities for me as a journalist, it was always, being part of a larger organization, some kind of entity, even if it was just when I started at Ad Exchanger, it was just 3 people. But, as a solo and as a business person, I would say if I did have to go back and do one thing over in my life, I would have taken some business courses. I always used to joke that, hey, I became a journalist because I hate math and I hate business. So, of course, I became a business journalist and couldn't escape it. But I would say the biggest oh shit moment was, I know I can do the job of editing, writing, and advising on what news is and how to find it and make it. But the idea of running a business, I'm very happy that my wife is a much better bookkeeper and editor than I am. But the idea of it doesn't automatically happen. Managing an actual business, getting contracts nailed down, it's an endlessly daunting thing. So when you asked how I was doing last week, there were some sleepless nights trying to nail down a contract and going back and forth there. There were a few times a few months ago, and I found it was common with everybody. It was around the end of the summer. All these conversations I was having with potential clients, I was like sitting back like, oh wow, there's so many things coming in. And then all of a sudden they got held up or they disappeared. And so the business part of it, I think, has given me a new appreciation for what publishers are going through. I think there's a tendency, and I think in a lot of cases it's correct when you look at something like the implosion of the Messenger a few weeks ago. Jimmy Finkelstein.
Bad, yeah.
It was a shame. A lot of people, that does seem to be a case in sort of a business model from a decade ago. Again, premised on that volume concept, as opposed to being niche and focused and original. They were just rewriting a lot of stuff and wasting a lot of people's talents. But, I do think that too often journalists have been, kind of just saying business is someone else's problem. We're doing great reporting. It's, the publisher's job, the sales team's job, the events team's job to go out and make money on this because we're doing great. And I don't think that that's enough. I think that if I had to, if I would tell people to necessarily major in journalism, it'd be a tough sell. I still think it, if you want to do it, that is a good way to start. But I would say that it's probably incumbent upon everybody as companies all across the spectrum shrink themselves, and especially with AI changing everything, you've got to be your own business person, and you've got to have a clear understanding on it. And I can say so far, it's been a great education. Wish I would have had it in a more purposeful way rather than winging it.
Right. Speaking of AI, how are you using AI in Brand Newsroom? Are we talking friendly robots or Skynet takeover?
So far, friendly robots. You gotta, ask me again in another 6 months to a year, and we'll see. I think like everybody else, I was, especially everybody else in, who does any kind of writing or editing or any kind of,
Right.
creative content work. I thought, so we started, and that's just around the time when ChatGPT came out. And, I was like, oh, well, this is a perfect time to start a content business. This thing is going to, I tried it out and was like, oh, wow, this thing is going to, replace me. And then I realized that, as good as it gets, it really won't. And it is a great tool. I mainly use it to speed up ideas. Like a lot of times I do part of what we do is a lot of, ghostwriting and thought leadership. And I have to, rather than me, my process of working for, writing some kind of, think piece is I need a good like half hour to kind of stare out the window, at least maybe an hour. Maybe I need to walk around. And so with ChatGPT, I can, at least sort of type in something and say, hey, act like a journalist and write an outline or write a 500-word essay on the state of newsroom ghost towns. And it'll come up with something pretty crappy, but it will give me a sense of like, oh, it'll clarify my thoughts, and then I can get started. It's,
I use it as a research assistant. I love it as a research assistant. It saves me a lot of time. I mean, I can just put in there, find as much facts about this person into relationship. Like when I asked it to look up stuff about you, I wanted to know like what you have written about AI and stuff like that. It didn't find a lot, but so I wanted to see, and it saves me a lot of time, instead of Google. So I think it definitely is saving time. I'm not, it's not creative in the same sense.
That's another skill as well, because I've used it for research as well. But then I particularly remember around that time when there was an embarrassing legal case where a lawyer had used arguments, had basically used ChatGPT. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was Cohen, right? That was it.
It wasn't Michael Cohen, but his lawyer. His lawyer did.
His lawyer? Oh, yeah, but I know the judge was like, the judge found out and was furious.
Yeah.
And that's happened before. I use it for a lot of stuff that in Aramaic and Hebrew that I can't figure out. And I'll ask it to find something. And occasionally it will say something. I'll go, that's not right. And it'll say, oh, I just made it up. You're like,
yeah, it's I really found, I remember, I would go back and forth trying to use ChatGPT and, Bard or, Gemini. And I really there was a few times I was frustrated with like, oh, these are really great examples. And then when it came time to use them, I was like, I asked it to cite sources. Like, I can't find these articles. It's like, no, oh, sorry, I guess it's wrong.
Sometimes they just make up stuff. It literally made up books that don't exist. And when I asked, like, oh yeah, we just made up this book, I'm like, but I was asking for real stuff, and it apologizes. I love that too. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand. You wanted something real.
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, like, I get it that hey, a human being is capable of doing that and worse. So it's like anything else. It's not. You can't just forget it. You can't just say take it at face value. You have to check anything. Like if when I have a freelancer working for us, I have to make sure. This was your work. You didn't plagiarize and that kind of thing.
Right.
So, like anything else, this is what, ultimately, so far at least, makes me feel like, okay, we have to keep an eye on these things. We have to manage them. You can't just sort of, plug it in and then just take out whatever and not, give it some, give it some stress testing.
So once clear as day and night, the line between journalism and marketing now seems to be drawn in invisible ink. As a master of both domains, how do you keep the ink from smudging and turning everything into an unreadable mess?
I think, like anything else, you have to. People can sense bullshit, and if you try to, even with my most lyrical work, you cannot dress up, garbage. You have to actually have something meaningful to say, and there's better ways of saying it, and I try to do that. But the blurring of lines, I will say, is in a good way. It's the marketing side is forced to adhere to more journalistic standards of truth. There's a real crisis in defining reality and truth right now. We all live in different bubbles, and we're almost to the point where it's like, no, the sky really isn't blue. It's some kind of yellowy orange, and the idea is that people, for the most part, do accept reality. And as long as you're speaking to a verifiable reality, whether it's journalism or marketing, that's what cuts through. You can't.
Is it art or a science?
It's a mix. It's like anything else in all of this. It's a mixture of both. The science is about the rules and the standards that you apply to what you create and how you and what you do with it. And then the art is the way you communicate it. One of things that really has kind of influenced me in my life was in terms as a writer. It was at college dorms. We were just talking about something, and I remember I had said something, of course, especially brilliant, and then a few minutes later, a friend of mine basically said the same thing, and I remember, this other friend turned to her. She was like really just sort of praising him for this, this incredible insight. And I'm like, I turned to her. I was like, I just said the same thing a few minutes ago, and she said, yeah, but he said it in a cooler way. And I was like, yeah, that's really what it comes down to. You can have the most,
that's
the
content marketing right there.
That's content marketing right there. But I think it's also journalism. You have to have, a compelling lead, a compelling headline. But if that headline is misleading, if that lead is a mess of unintelligible words, it's not going to go anywhere.
So how do we maintain editorial independence in a market-driven world?
I think it's the audience has to actively demand it and hold everyone accountable, whether it's journalists, publications, brands themselves. The idea is one of the best things about this democratizing of everything moment is that anyone can call bullshit on something, and you have to be able to back up what you've got. That is a real accountability that in the past you really didn't have.
Is it a sacred principle still, or it's just nice to have?
Oh, it's a sacred principle. You can get far with faking something, but then again, as we see with, again, clearly I'm obsessed with it, that royal family photo, the world will let you know that it does not accept it. I mean, there are obviously people saying, yeah, no big deal and whatever, but it's obviously gripped people in a way that people are worried about truth more than ever. And I don't think that we'll ever really agree on the exact terms, but I think we get close. And I think for the most part, it seems people will not tolerate any kind of fabrication. There are ways of really calling it out. You cannot get away with it, and people, for the most part, unless your deepest fans are there, they won't accept it. And that's how we get control over the Wild West that we have.
So I want to talk a little bit about fake news and misinformation or disinformation. How does ethical content marketing light the day?
I think that when I first started that move, when I went from Ad Exchanger to Yext in geo-marketing, for me, it was really important that I have in writing that you will not, you will not insert any kind of promotional or company favoritism towards a particular brand that I write about. You have to allow for journalistic independence. The idea is that no one wants to read sorry, PR people, a press release. It's a
Right.
tool to get you interested. But no one says like, I'm going to relax on the beach or at my villa or something and say, yeah, let's just read a stack of press releases. No, people want something that is going to be clearly informative, clearly entertaining, and somehow gives them something real to chew on. A lot of marketing and is meant to just sort of just tell instead of show. And the cliche of good writing is show don't tell, and you really can't do that without specifics and without clear language and without facts to back it up. You can't pretend and you can't dress it up.
So data's role in storytelling has exploded. How do you ensure it enriches the narrative rather than hijacking it?
It's, there's always think of that other cliche of there are, lies, damn lies, and statistics, right?
Right.
I think that it, this is where I think the power of storytelling comes in, because, data, information, unless it's contextualized, unless it's told to you in a compelling way, you're not going to know what to do with it. You're not going to believe it. It's, if you just get a random stat, what does it mean? And you need to have some context around that so that you can either argue it or assess the value of it. But, no one wants to just look at statistics unless you're a data analyst. And, nothing against data analysts, but, even they have to tell a story. You can't just, again, like press releases, no one wants to, I don't think, one just wants to sit and read a spreadsheet. Maybe if you're having trouble sleeping, maybe that could work. But there are still, I'm very happy to say, again, a lot of asks to write, white papers and to weave a narrative there. You have to have a connection. Otherwise, the disconnect is just not going to mean anything to anyone.
So as we tread the line between storytelling and selling, what is your vision in a world where journalism and marketing not only coexist but thrive?
Yeah, I think selling it has such a negative connotation, and no one wants to appear salesy. And I think it always comes down to, if I've got something that you want, or you've got something that I want, and you're telling me about it, and you're helping me get something that, as I said, is going to enrich and enliven my personal life or my work life, that's a good thing. And I think that's by having something of substance, something of value, and presenting it in a compelling way that doesn't make someone feel like they're being cheated. Again, going back to, I'm going to pick on the LinkedIn messages that everyone complains about, is just these cold sellings like, hey, I have a promise for you. I don't know, but you're not showing that you know anything about the person. You're just sending the same message to thousands of people. And
I get asked for merchant accounts all the time, which I have zero need for.
Yeah, and it's that's, again, it really doesn't work. Or they're working so hard to just get that one person who's going to say like, oh, sure, why not, that needle in a haystack. But
Right.
As I said, people see through it. It just so even if it works 1% of the time, 10% of the time, it's the amount of waste in that effort is just a bankrupt method.
I'm always curious about what people have behind them. I know it's a bunch of alcohol. So what beverage keeps the gears grinding, and you cannot say blood of my competitors?
I will not say that, because I don't want them to come after me. They know where I live now. I would say, I'm a big bourbon fan. I have, I did collect all this stuff behind me.
What's the one with the horse on it? I'm talking about the bourbon that has.
That's Pinhook bourbon.
Right. That is great.
I am not a. Cheers! We have to go out for a drink, or come on over next time for this. I would say, I used to just really, hate spirits. I thought, like, when I was a kid, I think that my first drink was at a friend's bar mitzvah when I was, also about 13.
Like kettle wine or something.
Close. No, that was not so bad. But when I was a kid, anyway. But I remember having, went up to the bar and gave me a screwdriver, and I just like, why would someone do that to orange juice? So I didn't have any interest in it, but
honestly, I'm the same way about screwdrivers. I don't know why I still don't know why someone would do that to orange juice.
Yeah, it's, we'll have to do another investigation into that. But I would say that my mind was changed when I first joined Adweek the first time around in
Right.
2000. I was sent to the 4A's conference in New Orleans and discovered Sazeracs, and I was like, "Oh my god, this stuff is amazing!" And so I just became, like anything that just sort of mystifies me. Just the history of bourbon, the rules around it, just fascinated me. There are so many stories about it, and I, in that sense, was kind of and started, seeing how wow, there are so many different kinds. Every kind of bourbon is different, and it just fascinated me. So, and I can say that. Small doses, everyone moderation. Most of these bottles have been here for they last a good like 5 to 10 years. So there you go.
Well, it lasts. That's a good thing about those things.
Yeah.
So spin us a yarn about your hometown. Were you writing ad copy on the crib walls?
Pretty much, actually. Luckily, I didn't get in trouble for that. But so I grew up in Brooklyn and still living in Brooklyn, can never leave. Well, I'll ask my wife. But I was reminded how we would, my parents, my dad's family had owned a bungalow in upstate New York in the Catskills. And so we would go up there in summer and like a lot of times we were in the middle of nowhere. We had this like bungalow was on this like kind of empty road. And so I was like usually pretty bored. So apparently my mom would love to remind me that I would just create, fake news with construction paper and crayons. So I'd create my own newspapers there about what should be going on in the country. So that's how it started, and no fake news now. And I haven't really, at that point when I was like maybe 6 years old. But that influence, I think, has stayed with me. The truth-telling part, not the fake news part.
So what's been the Mount Everest of your career? Hardest challenge that you stared down, and you can't say it was choosing to zoom back?
That is pretty hard and pretty distracting. So that's what I have film here. I would say it really was making the leap from ad exchanger and just doing traditional journalism to creating a new thing, because I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what wireframes were. It was always the design stuff, the actual building of the site. I just thought like, I don't know, websites look pretty simple. Just put, news in a drop down there. And I remember as we were building the site, I would, have just what I thought were pretty clear directions of this is what the homepage should look like. And I always compare it to something I've also never done, maybe not yet, but building a house. And I remember when I first saw the website was done, so many things didn't work. It didn't have, a way for people to subscribe, for example. And again, the analogy for me was, it's like, here's your someone, I designed a house, I requested a house, and I noticed, hey, the doors don't open, and there are no windows. It's like, well, you didn't say that you wanted that. It's like I didn't think I needed to say that I wanted. I thought those were just the obvious things of what a new site has. It didn't have, and I didn't realize I needed to spell out every detail of what needs to be there. And just the idea of, will this work if I just made a big mistake? I left a kind of job that I really loved. I was agonizing. I remember actually literally pacing to say, should I take this job, and should I just stay at? Should I just stay at?
Was it the first time working alone? Was the first time working for yourself? That is.
Yeah, it was the first time. Yeah, completely alone, and no real idea, how to create a news site.
Right.
Having worked on it, I had ideas, but the process was something that was pretty daunting. But then it worked out, and happily, I can say, had a lot of support around it, which also helped, and patience in terms of my own trial and error. And so there's that, and then building this thing, so many things I didn't know. I think. Especially having, I've done freelance in the past and just hated it. I was terrible about it. You would get paid, every 3 months for something, and then what am I going to do? I'm going to max out a credit card or something. So I learned from that, but it's still a challenge to say, how much work to take on and how to design the payment schedules and that kind of thing, but still managing. And it's been again, a great education.
So when you're not weaving words, what is your favorite pastime? And please say model trains, because I have a hunch about you and tiny locomotives.
I think I need to move to a bigger house, and then once I have a basement, I'll get into that. But I would say playing guitar just for myself, and
Right.
sometimes, unfortunately, for my wife. I'd say
She feels the same way about my saxophone. So
well,
my
see, we got to
wife,
start
not
the
your
jam
wife, my
session.
wife feels the same way.
I'm sure my wife would love your saxophone playing, and well, again, let's start putting that on Spotify as well.
An industry band.
But yeah, we got to do it. I think it's a must. It's one of those kind of like South by Southwest things or something.
So who's your Yoda?
I'll get my people.
Who's your Yoda? Who
who's
guides
my
you
Yoda?
through the ship of the consent cosmos?
I would say my wife is my Yoda, therapist, bodyguard. I think.
Right.
She's like lets me know when I'm fooling myself or driving myself crazy or driving both of us crazy. But I've been really lucky to have a lot of people who are just really kind to me and just love to help out and love to
Anyone in particular you hold in high esteem, like someone you might have their poster on the back of your door?
You have to send me one of yours. We need that we need more artwork around here. I would say, there's been so many people who've influenced me. I feel like I can't just name one person, but I would say, I would say the initial person, he passed away about 2 years ago. Is Jack Foyer, who hired me at Adweek the first time around, and
Right.
I didn't know anything about media buying. I thought I was going for a media reporter job, and he asked me, do I know what a media reporter does? And I said, I don't know, writes about the media. And I had no idea that, this is, days before, years before Mad Men, and that kind of gave people some more insight about what an ad agency does. I just thought ad agencies were creative. I thought it was like, Darren on Bewitched or something. I didn't know about media buying, and it was a fascinating look behind it. And I'd say this editor took a chance on me. I had done some freelancing for Adweek and Ad Age just before that time, but took a chance on me and gave me this education. From there, people like John Ebert at Ad Exchanger brought me into that at a later point. Then Rafat Ali and Stacey Kramer at Paid Content was also like just a massive that job also. Adweek and I'd say in Paid Content where I was at before at Ad Exchanger actually. Those two, Paid Content really introduced me to ad tech. Before that, I'd really just been focusing on traditional agency and traditional media, and so that immersion into ad tech with Paid Content and then Ad Exchanger, I'd say was life changing. So to credit those two.
So how do we build a dam against the flood of deepfakes?
I think that I'm a pretty optimistic person generally. But again, ask me in another day or so. I really feel like that. The truth that reality wins. Reality, whether reality doesn't care what you want to happen. It just happens, and you can either face it or you won't. And there is, as I said earlier, there is less and less tolerance for fakeness, whether it's
Right.
something as a family photo, or if it's about misappropriation of funds, or if it's about you're selling something that there's no there. So I think that I think trusting the intelligence of the audience for the most part to hold everyone accountable, to hold the standards of reality accountable, because ultimately at the end of the day you're going to have to deal with it anyway. And maybe you want to believe this happy photo of a princess in a backyard, but even that, as I said, people have no tolerance for it, and the truth comes out, and you can't ultimately, you can fight it, but ultimately it carries through.
So before we go, if you could send yourself a text message back to yourself when you started in the industry, what would you tell yourself?
Yeah, as I said, I think learning, sitting down and learning business and forcing myself to maybe, I think bookkeeping is a really great skill. I don't want bookkeepers to lose their jobs, and I really would love at a certain point when LLMs can do it for me to a certain extent. And I can say there's a lot of automation that does help. If I had to actually do this all by hand, I'd definitely would be throwing myself off a bridge. But I think that's the thing, and also the idea of most of the good things that have happened to me have not been part of a concrete plan. I think just moving through life and being interested, has been a great way for me to find stuff that I love doing. So,
and that's a wrap on today's electrifying episode of the ADOTAT Show. A massive thank you to David Kaplan for surfing the digital wave with us today and sharing his storytelling savvy. David, you've given us enough food for thought to binge on until our next episode. Big shout out to Troutman Amin, LLP, our rockstar legal team keeping our digital dreams bright and our episodes in the clear. Without them, we'd just be talking heads with nowhere to broadcast. So hats off for keeping the lights on. We're also thrilled to welcome Diablo Media to our sponsor squad this month. Your support adds an extra spark to our digital firestorm. Thanks for fueling the innovation engine. As we close out, remember our mantra: stay curious, stay bold, and know more than you did yesterday.